You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Professor Gavriel Salvendy, who is a professor emeritus of industrial engineering at Purdue University and the head of the Department of Industrial Engineering at Tsinghua University in Beijing. I originally found out about him as an article in the New York Times. He is a Hungarian-Israeli-American who is doing work in China. So I guess the first question I'd like to ask, Professor, is the U.S. and China have such different cultures, including business cultures. How do you deal with this?
Oh, it's a very excellent question. I think you need to understand the thought process of the Chinese and the American. They're totally different. Because of that, I had an international conference last year in Miami on cross-cultural decision-making, where actually over 1,000 people attended. And the reason is because in China, in order to do business, first you have to develop a trust. Anything that you have in writing is meaningless unless you have a trust between the two parties. But in America, trust is meaningless. The only meaningful one is the legal document you signed.
That's okay. Okay. What other cultural tricks do we need or understandings should we have?
I think that is really the dominating one. You cannot have a meeting with a Chinese businessman and sign. You better go out for a lunch, go out for a dinner, go out, walk on a park, have another cup of coffee, and after a week or two, when he or she developed a trust in you, then go down and talk about business.
Very interesting. My brother who lives also in Israel. My brother is a patent attorney here. He does international patents in the U.S. and also in Israel, and he went to China a while back to talk to the Chinese about the importance of filing patents in Israel. And he was told when he went there, they said, you should mention to the people you meet that you are the father of 6 sons, as my brother happens to be. So he said, why is that? He said, because then they'll really think you're something special.
Yes, exactly.
China is definitely a hot investment area these days. It's always in the news and people are always talking about it. Do you think that's something that individuals should be looking to put money there, or is it really better for institutions?
No, I think it's okay for everybody, but of course you have to be careful. In every country, in every investment, you have good investment and you have bad investment. And you have companies that if you invest in individual companies, some companies get bankrupt, just like they get bankrupt in Israel and in America. So if you don't know the system and you don't know the company you invest, you will be doing on average okay. If you put in something like a mutual fund, if you invest in individual companies without knowing the nature of the company, you may lose your pants.
Okay, but that could be the same thing.
Everywhere. They're the same in the U.S., they're the same in Israel. But the benefit of knowing a company, I'll just give you a very quick example. There's a company, for example, that manufactures gears for cars. Currently, it produces about 1 million gears a year. It has demand for over 2 million, 2.5 million. It needs funding to develop another production line, 1 or 2 additional production lines. If it can, it will reduce the cost of producing by about 40 to 60% because all the overhead won't need any new overhead. So basically the value of those investments will mushroom. But of course, there you're talking on many tens of millions of dollars of investment, probably closer to 100 million to be a partner. So individual that is extremely wealthy can do it, but the run-of-the-mill individual doesn't have that type of money.
We are talking to Professor Gavriel Salvendy, a Hungarian-Israeli-American professor both in the U.S. as well as in China, In fact, he's the author or editor of 36 different books. And we just spoke for a moment about the risks involved, whether it's for individuals or institutions. One of the risks that we often talk to people about when they're investing far away from home is political risk. Can you comment on the political risk in China that we should be watching out for?
I don't think there's political. I think the main risk, of course, each time when you go abroad is currency fluctuation, which occurs with any country. When you invest funds abroad, you have currency fluctuation. Is probably your biggest one. The other risk is like you have risk in every country, that if you invest in individual stocks, it may not do well and you may lose all your funds. Otherwise, there is no really difference in China than in the U.S. or other countries.
I mean, there are certain different outlooks. For example, what's the retirement age in China?
It varies depending on your position. For example, if you are in the university and if you are a regular full professor, for example, you retire at 65. If you are a member of the Academy of Science or Academy of Engineering, you retire at 80.
No kidding. I thought that there were people in China who retire at 50 and already start getting a pension. In fact, I heard that because we have guests from China, the Kaifeng Jews, who happen to have come from China and are learning in yeshiva near where I live. We have them over to our house for Shabbat all the time. And one of them said his parents are retired at 50 and getting a state pension.
It must be perhaps, 50 I never heard. 55 I heard, and 55, for example, one of the students' mother is a dishwasher in one of the government-owned building where there's a restaurant, and she needs to retire at 55. She's a dishwasher.
Okay, so I guess it depends what you're doing.
Varies. Yeah, it varies.
My day job is that I'm a financial advisor. I have a company called Profile Investments based in Jerusalem, and I do financial planning services, usually for people who are living in Israel who invest outside. And I get this opportunity to speak to interesting people on the radio once a week. And one of them I spoke to recently was the fellow who wrote the book Startup Nation, Saul Singer, who spoke about how Israel became a master of startup companies. And he told me something very interesting, which is, though the book is being translated into many languages, the very first language it's going to is Chinese. He said, because the Chinese are very interested in how Israel does the whole startup side of the business, because they're Chinese apparently good at production, and Israel's good at startup. Is it possible given the Chinese business mentality, for them to become a startup nation too?
I don't think that will be the main one. I think what will happen, the biggest thing that will occur in China, currently we have about 100 million people in manufacturing. The bulk of people in China are employed in agriculture. What we will see the next 10 years is that about 100 million of the people who work in agriculture will move into manufacturing. The manufacturing segment will double in size to 200 million, and the corporations will become larger and more specific. The largest corporation currently in China, manufacturing, employs over 350,000 people in one location.
What company is that?
The leather, Foxtrom, Southern China, and they have the housing it's basically a big town, the company. And I visited, and the level of specialized manufacturing equipment is mind-boggling because of the volume that goes through that company. And I think that's what we will see. The companies will become bigger. They will have more specialized equipment. They will utilize more analytical tools such as operations research, mathematics, and so on to make the system more efficient. You know, in China, at first level, manufacturing was strictly on muscle and cheap labor. Then you move to the second level when manufacturing benefited from automation and machinery. And by so doing, you increase the quality of production in China. Now you move to the third level in China, where you use analytical tools such as mathematics, operations research, heavy IT, to make the best use of all resources. So you further increase productivity. And that is now the emphasis. Currently, you have all three segments still working in China. The bulk is in the second stage in automation, and the few elite ones move to the top.
Very interesting. Okay. We have been talking to Professor Gavriel Salvendy, who is a professor both in the U.S. as well as in China, and speaks all over the place, all around the world, and writes extensively about business ties. Professor, just before we go, could you tell us how people could follow your work?
Send me an email.
Okay, where's that?
My last name is Salvendy at Purdue, PURDUE.edu.
Great. Okay, listen, I would like to once again thank you very much for your time. This has truly been fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.